welcome to the podcast. And my guest this week is Sharon Worth, and she's a coach, and she specialises working with women in menopause and beyond, and helping them to identify their particular traits and what they might need to discover. She is neurodivergent, and she works with neurodivergent women also. And I realise, and we talked about this, that it's a very particular time for us when we reach menopause. And for many women, that is the time that they start to recognise their neurodivergence, their autism, ADHD, because we start to see ourselves so much more clearly. I write quite a bit about this in my book, The Neurodivergent Soul. So do please take a read if you're called to that time in your own life when things are starting to wake up for you. I think it's a profound rite of passage. I certainly enjoyed mine. And Sharon and I got into a really lovely conversation about how it is for us and some of the challenges and the difficulties, as well as the illumination that happens and how we get to see ourselves more clearly. I hope you enjoy this podcast and look forward to connecting with you. If you have anything to share, please do get in touch. Sharon, thank you so much for coming along to my podcast. It's lovely to meet you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So tell me, who are you? What can you say about yourself as an introduction to our podcast, to our listeners?
My name is Sharon, and I'm 53 years old, post-menopause, and my work has very much evolved over the past 10 years and has sort of moved with me, if you like. So I currently work as a life coach, a menopause coach, neurodiversity coach. I still don't quite know what to call myself, but I'm a qualified and accredited coach, and the space I work in is supporting women who are discovering their neurodivergence, which might be ADHD, autism, or both, during the menopause transition, which is quite a common thing.
So tell us about your journey with that. How was it for you?
So, yeah, my journey, it feels like a very long, rambling journey. I am what is increasingly becoming known as ADHD, so autistic and ADHD. And I am a mum of 3 neurodivergent children. And I never, for a long time, even considered that I might be neurodivergent until perimenopause came along. And everything just sort of fell apart, really, for me. And I, at the time, assumed it was just the symptoms of perimenopause. And so I sort of went down the route of pursuing HRT to see whether that would help. And at the time I was told that, I was a little bit young. And instead I was referred to a rheumatologist, actually, a consultant rheumatologist, because I had very debilitating joint pain and there was a concern that I might have inflammatory arthritis. So this just sort of goes to show the route that we go down to try and diagnose perimenopause. I'm pleased to say that all my tests came back normal. And eventually I did start HRT and things improved. Apart from the cognitive side, I continued to really struggle. And it was when my autistic son came to me and said, I think I have ADHD. I would like to be assessed. We arranged that and I sat in on his assessment, really to fill in the childhood information as his mum. And it was then that the penny dropped, because I could relate to or answer yes to so many of the questions.
Mm.
And I thought, that's maybe what it is. So I went ahead and I was actually assessed for ADHD. I got the diagnosis, and my reason for wanting that diagnosis, because I know that labels don't matter to everyone. I know that a lot of people self-diagnose. My reason really was I'd like to try medication, because I was struggling that much, even on HRT, that I'd like to give it a go. Because I'd seen how well my son had responded to it. And he had actually opted to take the non-stimulants. So I thought, well, actually, if it's worked for him, it might work for me. And without going into too much detail, it really was a game changer. And I'm still taking that today. I'm no longer on HRT, but I am continuing with my ADHD medication. But what also helped me was therapy, making sense of my diagnosis. I went very much through a bit of a grieving process. You know, if I'd known sooner, my life could have been very, very different. And I also had some ADHD coaching, and I think that's really what inspired me to become a coach and to train in neurodiversity. And that's really how I've arrived at where I'm at. However, I've realised this is a very long answer to your question. When I received my ADHD diagnosis, it made sense of a lot of things, but not quite everything. And again, it was my eldest son who said to me, "Mum, you might like to read this book." And it was about a female experience of autism. And that was that final piece for me. I thought, oh, wow, okay, it's not just ADHD. I think I might be autistic as well. And I sought out an autism diagnosis, which came 2 years after my ADHD diagnosis. And I am continuing to learn, to grow, to self-advocate, to experience my very presence in this world. And that is what has given me the motivation and the passion to support other women who make these discoveries later in life, because it can be very, very confusing, and it can feel very, very lonely and very isolating if you haven't got that space to talk it out. And yeah, it's mind-blowing.
Wow. Tell me, what would you say the main difficulties were for you as you approached this period of your life?
It's now very clear to me that they were always there, but I was pushing through. I was very much pushing through. I was masking, I was copying, I was trying to be neurotypical. And actually part of my story is that I used alcohol. I self-medicated with alcohol, a little bit with drugs when I was younger as well. I was looking for anything just to feel a little bit more comfortable in my own skin, and to sort of change the way I was feeling, which was very, very different. So when I reached menopause, and having done all the research and the education that I've engaged in over recent years, I now understand why menopause unmasked my autism and my ADHD. And it is very much the influence that hormones, female hormones in particular, have on the brain. They provide that ability and that energy to mask and to push through. So when they start dropping off, that ability to mask just sort of drops away. So that was the hard bit. That was, I mean, I describe it as the wheels falling off. I felt like I was spinning in circles. I couldn't just focus on one task at a time. The brain fog, the memory, the forgetfulness. I was making arrangements to meet friends and forgetting all about it. I wasn't showing up for appointments. I was absolutely exhausted. It was so hard to function on a day-to-day basis, and yet I kept thinking, I've always done this. I've always been able to do this. Why can't I do it anymore? So to have that understanding now that is why it was the falling levels of hormones, or the fluctuating hormones at the time, that was just creating all the chaos. Yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it? How many parents are discovering this neurodivergence in themselves because of their children's diagnosis. It was the same for me, and my daughter had her diagnosis, and I'm ticking the boxes on her documents. I go, but that's me, but I'm like that. And she says, yes, Mom, I think maybe you should have a diagnosis. And
it's quite interesting, actually, because when I chose carefully about who I would share my diagnosis with, but it was quite interesting that maybe 2 or 3 friends responded with "no shit, Sherlock," or some sort of comment like that. Oh, I could have told you that years ago when we were at school, or and that's the reality of a late diagnosis, is all of a sudden, and all these memories start flooding back, don't they? And you're like, oh, that makes sense now. That's why I struggled with that. And again, that's where the anger comes from. That's where the grief comes from, because you were like, well, I was really let down, and then self-blame sometimes comes into it. Particularly for me, when I got my autism diagnosis, I was saying to myself, how could I not have known? How could I not? It was so obvious. How could I not have known? But we just. It's mind-blowing, as I say.
It is rather. So for the majority of, or a lot of assessments tend to focus on childhood, because that's where it shows up so much more before the masking starts to really kick in. Hey? So what were you like as a child, do you think? And what would you have been more like if you hadn't started to mask?
So in terms of what I was like as a child, I was always so anxious. I remember, I know my safe spaces. I remember my safe spaces at home. I used to find small spaces to, I'd wrap myself up in the duvet, or we had this little round window actually in our house halfway up the stairs, and I used to curl myself into a little ball and rest in there like a cat.
Oh, sweet.
But yes, I was incredibly anxious, and I recall the separation anxiety from very, very early on. If I was dropped off at even preschool playgroup, I remember that sense of terror. Actually, it was terrifying. And then infant school, every single morning. I think it's described as a I've heard the term like a headache in your tummy or something like that. I don't know. It's a weird one, but I used to have this. I always used to have tummy pain and nausea and these awful sort of feelings of anxiety and not wanting to go to school, but of course being forced to go. And I was very compliant. I was very compliant. But school was just utterly bewildering to me. And I guess having that, the ADHD combined with the autism, the classroom was incredibly difficult for me. I remember the smell of dinners cooking, and I remember how repulsive I found that. The noise at the dinner hall. I remember it all, and actually, I take myself there, and it's. I don't know how I got through it. And I remember coming home. I remember getting to the end of the day and feeling utterly exhausted. Um, and then, from a social perspective, friendships were always very difficult. I kept getting things wrong. I kept upsetting people, and I didn't quite understand. And I was thinking, gosh, I've only told the truth. Why are they being so, why are they so upset? And socially, in terms of family life, I always used to feel ill before we went anywhere. So it seems that any time we were going anywhere, or if a play date was arranged, or I had a birthday party to go to, I found it incredibly difficult. And sometimes I didn't get there. Sometimes they did. My parents actually did give up trying and bring me home. And that all makes sense now. It really does.
Of course.
But I think I just reached.
What about sensory experiences and issues? Did you have any of those?
Yeah, and I think that very much, from a very early age, as I said, I've always had this strong sense of smell. I can find smells very, very overpowering. You'll very often see me walking down the high street like this. If I'm that was me covering my nose, by the way, nose and mouth. If I'm walking past, market stalls with fish out or cheese out, or anything particularly smelly, Christmas time, the crowds, the noise, and the smells. And yes, going back to school days, the smell of the school dinner. So smell's a big one. Lighting can be a bit much. I really don't like supermarkets. They're too big, they're too bright, there's too much going on. There's too much sensory input. And I've always been like that. And it's interesting because as soon as the wonderful world of online supermarket shopping arrived with technology, which must have been back in the, I don't know, maybe mid to late 90s. I was all for that. And I've shopped online ever since. I have a weekly delivery from a grocery company, and absolute game changer. I'm all right to nip into a smallish shop, midweek if I need to. I've run out of bin bags, for example, the other day. Pop to the local Tesco Express. I can cope with that mostly. But yeah, it's
right.
When I talk about this, it really is remarkable to me, how I just powered through that for so long. And no wonder women reach midlife feeling absolutely
yeah. What about education? Did you learn? Were you a good student, or was that hard for you?
I struggled with learning. A lot of things went completely over my head. I have a very strong suspicion that part of my neurology involves dyscalculia. I've always really struggled with numbers and sequencing. And maths was just bewildering to me. And actually, I never got my maths GCSE. And that was tough. I grew up in a very small village, and I went to a very small primary school. So in some ways, I guess I was quite lucky there was only 60 of us in the entire school. There was 3 classrooms with 20 children in each. Had I gone to a big inner city primary school, maybe I wouldn't, maybe I'd have coped even less well than I did.
Right.
When I actually went up to senior school or secondary school, I realised how far behind I was. Interestingly, English, I was always very, very strong in. I've always had a real love for words and writing, which has come back to me actually later in life. I really enjoy sort of writing articles and blogs and journaling and reflecting. And amazingly, for somebody who always wanted to write a book but never could, I've co-authored one book and sole authored a second. So
Very good.
I'm quite proud of myself for that.
Nice.
But yeah, I scraped through school, and I think this innate need to be able to fit in started to evolve into I began to act the clown a little bit.
Okay.
I can't really see how I can fit in and learn, so I'm just going to mess about. I was removed from 2 of my GCSE courses, probably around, I would have been 14, 15, and it was around about that time. There were problems at home with my parents separating, and I kind of went off the rails a little bit. I was 14 when I started drinking, and I was 44 when I stopped. So I had a 30-year drinking career on and off, because through my 3 pregnancies, I didn't drink, and I didn't drink when I was breastfeeding, and so I had these periods of sobriety, but often I went back to it because it was like a coping strategy.
Did you have special interests as a child? Was there anything in particular? When we talk of autism, there's often a special interest that is held.
Yeah. I collected things, and I liked things in order. Back in the 80s, there were these little ornaments, and they were called whimsies. I don't know if that rings a bell with anyone.
Yes, yeah, little tiny animals.
Yes, I
porcelainy.
absolutely loved them. So I collected all the animal families.
Yeah.
So and there were so many different breeds of dogs, as I remember, and they were all grouped and sort of, and they surrounded me in my bedroom. So I had some sort of sense of order from that, I suppose. But yeah, that was one thing that I sort of questioned, and I thought, well, actually there was no one big thing that stood out. And I was talking to my daughter about it, and she said, yes, but you have had obsessions in adulthood, and she started to reel them off. I was like, oh, yes, I've never really. And again, I think it's just, I never associated any of these things as unusual. I was,
why would you?
Doesn't everyone do that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love the image of you as a little girl with all your little whimsies. That's so sweet.
And I think Second World War was quite an interest for me as well. I used to read a lot about the Second World War.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? And what if, when your daughter's talking about your obsessions now, what's your current obsession?
Well, it's my work.
Right.
Actually, it really is. It's just I just love learning. I'm learning about the brain. I'm deep diving into hormones. I'm learning about the different types of neurodivergence, neurodiversity. I'm so passionate about it, I suppose, that I'll just spend hours reading. So I feel like I've really It's taken me about 50 years, but I found my niche, I found my passion, and it feels like it's finally something I can stick with, because I've tried so many things. I've started things, I've not finished them. Um, and the ADHD diagnosis and starting medication was the catalyst for change for me.
Mm.
It meant that I finished off the qualifications that I was working on at the time, which enabled me to start more qualifications, and I've just gone on this. I think, coming back to education and learning,
Yeah.
I now know, actually, do you know what? It really wasn't my fault that I struggled so much at school. And now that I have the skills, the knowledge, the strategies, the chemicals, I've now got the ability to learn, and it's become a habit. It's become a hobby. I've gone from, right, got that qualification, tick, right, now I'm going to do this, tick. I'm currently enrolled on a diploma in neurodiversity.
Amazing.
And it's great. I'm loving it. It's really, we're having really interesting conversations as part of the learning, and it's,
Of course.
yeah, I love it.
So tell us more about your work. What kind of people come to you? How do you work? What's your offering? What's it about?
So I offer one-to-one coaching, and it's very much bespoke. It's centered around what is needed by the individual. But I'm a trained ADHD coach. I've done lots of training in menopause, and as I said at the beginning, my focus, or my niche, is supporting women who are discovering their neurodivergence in menopause, which is a very vulnerable time of life anyway. And it might be that it's a very therapeutic approach to coaching, in terms of some women just need space to be heard, to be listened to, and to be understood. But one thing I've learned, having done very traditional level 5 coach training and then done ADHD coach training, is that neurodivergent people do need a slightly different approach, with a little bit more direction.
Okay.
So traditionally, coaching is considered, it's very collaborative. A coach shouldn't be giving advice. Always be non-judgmental. And it's very future focused. It's about getting someone from where they are now to where they want to be. And it's a wonderful thing. I absolutely love coaching. What I was finding when I was coaching neurodivergent people is that they lack the psychoeducation and the knowledge about their brains, their condition, and there are strategies that they may not know about. So from that comes a slightly more directive flow of coaching. So if, for example, I was coaching you and you were saying, I'm really struggling with task initiation. I can't get something started, and I don't know what to do about it. I could offer you some strategies that you may not even be aware of, that could be really helpful. So why would I withhold that from you? So I hope that makes some sense. But essentially what I'm doing is helping those that are discovering their neurodiversity, their neurodivergence later in life. I'm helping them with processing the grief, I'm able to provide a little bit of validation, a little bit of psychoeducation around hormones and how it impacts the neurodivergent brain. And from there, we look at, so, what are the pain points? What are you struggling with? What do we need to focus on?
Mm.
And it could be, looking at executive function. It could be looking at focus. It could be looking at rejection sensitivity dysphoria, procrastination, anything. And that's what I love about it. You never know what a client is going to present with. And it's that beautiful collaborative approach of listening and asking some questions and allowing that person the space to really think and make sense of their thoughts. And sometimes by saying things out loud, you're able to make more sense of them, rather than sort of, squirreling yourself away and having all these thoughts circulating around your mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about the this connection between the menopause. I'm what am I, 14 years post-menopause. So I'm 65 and I only got my diagnosis in my early 60s, 64, in fact, for my own neurodivergence, though I was kind of coming to it, ever since I was 60, 61. It was becoming very clear to me. And I didn't know anything about any of it when I had my menopause. I enjoyed my menopause. I didn't suffer with it at all. In fact, I had a very creative, wonderful time. But I was kind of pretty determined that's the way I was going to approach it. So it was a very special time for me and a very, very creative time for me. But I'm curious, when I think back to it, what would have been the signs that would have pointed me in the direction of neurodiversity? I'm not sure I would have picked up on them because I didn't know anything about it. I'd lived with my children who were, some of them clearly neurodivergent as little ones, but I think in those days we didn't think about labels much at all. And because I was so different in myself, I just allowed my children to be different. It was I wasn't enforcing any kind of structure or sort of mainstream qualities on them. It was like we lived a very free and open life together. And so that was the norm for me. So I wonder, now thinking back, what would have the things have, what would have shown up during my menopause that might have made me go, oh, there's something else there. So it's not just about being different. What is this difference, and what is it about my menopause that's showing me that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And hearing you talk is, it's beautiful that you've raised your children to be their authentic selves. I probably, I know you shouldn't have regrets, so to speak, but one of my biggest regrets is not knowing that there was an alternative to forcing my children into school, because none of them coped well in that environment, and we had a very, very stressful, traumatic time. We're all traumatized from school. And actually all three of them ended coming out of school.
Right.
But it was after a very, very, traumatic period of time. And I guess that is the difference, is that I was brought up to fit the neurotypical model. I was forced into neurotypical social situations, and I continue to force myself into those situations. And as a parent, I force my children into those situations. And if I could go back and do it all again, it would look very different.
We just didn't know. We didn't know.
And that is perhaps the difference between your menopause not unmasking your neurodiversity and my menopause very obviously unmasking it. It is really interesting, isn't it? Can I ask you a question?
I think it is, and please, yes, of course you can.
What led to you seeking your diagnosis? Was you mentioned earlier sitting in on your daughter's assessment? Was it as a
It
result
was,
of that?
yeah, it was because of my daughter, and her and I think what I felt, I wanted to know. I'm a very curious kind of person, you know. I'm always very interested in the human condition. That's part of my work and part of what I do. So there was always this fascination with that kind of thing. And when I started to see what was happening for my daughter and how she was recognizing it, she's had other issues as well, health-wise. So it felt really important that she went down that journey. I then started to learn more about it. I wanted to understand her. I did a course to study about autism and ADHD, and I just became very fascinated with my own life and what my childhood had been like. You know, it's in no way was easy at all. I suffered hugely with the education system and many other areas of my life, and rebelled massively against it all. But I think for me, it was more about I want to know this about myself, because then I can understand my daughter, I can understand my other children, I can understand my grandchildren, I can understand my life better, and I can be of better service to other people, particularly other women, especially those late diagnosed, my kind of second half of life. And that's where, you know, I've got to know this stuff because I need to know what I'm actually dealing with and who I'm in service to. So that was basically, that's how it was for me. And this podcast has, you know, it's been going now for 3.5, probably nearly 4 years. And it was kind of different, but it was focused on people doing different things in the world. So in some ways, there was a quality of neurodivergence there with people. But then I wanted to get really clear, okay, this is what I'm wanting to focus on. This is clearly what my work is in the world, is be that advocate for people who are different, whether they're neurodivergent or simply living life out of the box, or just not wanting to try or spend their whole lives trying to fit in.
Yeah.
So I've never really gone along with any general narrative. It's like actually with menopause, for me, I wanted to have my own experience of menopause. That was the important thing for me, was that my mother had told me that her menopause started at 50. She didn't feel anything. She said there was no difference. No. And I can remember going like this, you know, hot in here, isn't it? And it was a cold day, that sort of thing. I know she probably did feel things, but she's the kind of person who wouldn't really admit to any discomfort in any case. But she told me she was 50, and she told me that her mother was 50. And so therefore I was going to be 50 when I had my menopause. And I was on the dot. I was 50, last bleed, that sort of thing. And I didn't want to read books about it. I didn't want to listen to what other people's experience was on it necessarily, apart from a few close friends. I wanted to feel into what was it like for me to go through this experience and to, you know, unravel my own story around it. And that's kind of my approach to life, really. What's my experience of this? Not what does it say I should be doing or anything like that.
Yeah.
What's my own personal experience of this? So I went through all these crazy rages and all sorts of, like, you know, the hot sweats, all the rest of it, taking towels to bed with me, getting out the paints and the crayons. And I mean, I had a yurt in the garden at the time, and I just immersed myself in there with lots of creative stuff. And a lot came out of that. A whole body of work came out of it from that menopausal period. So I was playing with all sorts of interesting ideas and allowing the energy that I was experiencing at that time, this creative life force almost, to just pour out and become something
that's
else.
beautiful. I
And
mean,
I think
I did experience a number of physical and sometimes debilitating symptoms, which is why I did explore HRT, which did help with that.
Yeah.
But I was very keen to come off of that HRT once I knew I was well into postmenopause.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, despite the physical discomforts, I do feel that I kind of embraced it as well and saw it as a little bit of a
Yeah,
rebirth.
absolutely. That's
I
what it
did
is.
lots and lots of yoga. And in fact, I went
Right.
and did a menopause yoga teacher training as well.
Nice.
Um,
Oh, lovely.
and yeah, it's a lovely way to embrace it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean
that is important. It is
yeah,
important, isn't it?
and
And yeah, to see it as a rite of passage.
yeah, and
That's
and
my approach.
a new beginning. I mean,
Exactly.
we've both shaped our careers around this, which
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
great.
It's just
How things can
fantastic. Yeah.
evolve.
Yeah. And there's so much out there that talks so negatively about menopause and,
Mm,
this as if it's this massive problem, but it's not. It's a new start to life. It's
mm,
a new opportunity to get to know yourself in a much richer, in-depth way.
yeah,
So I can imagine that your journeys with women would involve a lot of that, to
a lot
really,
of
who are
exploration.
you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
who are you? The identity. Yeah, self-identity. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what are your hopes now for the future? What do you hope to expand into or to grow into, or what's your thoughts for second half of life emerging?
I I hope to reach as many women as I possibly can who are questioning themselves. I think that's it. I think the very fact that I never considered I might be neurodivergent and that there are many other people out there with a very similar experience, and particularly those who are out there self-medicating, those who are out there using drugs or alcohol to try and push down that anxiety, to try and fit in, to try and feel a little bit better. um I've been sober for almost 9 years.
Lovely.
um
Right.
and I'd like to give people that are struggling hope, because actually once you understand yourself and you accept yourself for who you are, and you let go of the need to conform, and the need to please other people, or the need to feel validated by other people. What am I trying to say? Um, let go of this sense that, oh, what will people think?
Mm.
Let go of it.
Mm.
Um, all I can say is that I've through my own journey, and I did need therapy, I did need coaching, I did need the validation of diagnosis, but I now live my life with a sense of peace in who I am
Right.
as a being. And I want that for other people, because I
Mm.
know how painful it was at times.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and being stuck in a loop of addiction as well. It's I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
No,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, very debilitating. And it does go
yeah,
hand in hand with neurodivergence, doesn't it?
yes, absolutely. Very,
Yeah.
very common. And I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of shame wrapped up in it as well,
Sure.
um, which is why it's very difficult to reach out and ask for help.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to be there for women who are in that vulnerable space and they need somebody who's lived that
Of
and who
course.
help to support them, and who understands. And actually, I'd like to write another book.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
What's this one going to be about?
Do you know what? I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm going to see how things evolve. The book that I co-authored is all about managing menopause with ADHD, and it's very it's full of lots of useful information, education, and some sort of tips as to how best to support yourself. And really enjoyed that process. And then I think because I was, I had that sort of pinch me moment. My gosh, I've actually written and published a book. It's out there.
Nice.
I was then inspired to write my own story, which I found incredibly cathartic. And it's very, very short little book. It's called Meeting Myself for the First Time, and it is actually just about growing up with undiagnosed ADHD and autism.
Amazing, wonderful, well done.
It's my little short story. And so I suppose off the back of that, maybe my next book might be exploring that late discovery, that, the grief process that we go through. Yeah, but I just find it incredibly cathartic to write. And if it can reach a few people and help a few people to, step more into the light, then I feel that I've served well. Yeah.
Beautiful. One last message for our listeners.
One last message. Don't be afraid to be yourself.
Very nice. Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharon. It's been a real delight to talk to you, with you, and to learn more about your offering in the world.
Likewise. Thank you.